The laboratory hummed with the quiet intensity of a cathedral. Dr. Alan Carter stood before the holographic display, watching as billions of microscopic machines swarmed through a simulated bloodstream, identifying and repairing damaged cells with flawless precision. After 15 years of research, countless failed prototypes, and an investment that had nearly bankrupted Nexus Biotechnologies, they had finally done it. The nanobots worked perfectly. "Are you seeing this, Eliza?" Alan whispered, unable to hide the tremor of excitement in his voice. Dr. Eliza Wright, his research partner and Nexus's head of molecular engineering, nodded slowly. Her dark eyes reflected the blue glow of the display. "It's beautiful," she said. 10 years ago, this would have been science fiction. And now it's reality." Alan expanded the simulation, watching as the nanobots systematically identified and eliminated cancer cells without damaging healthy tissue. "We're going to save millions of lives. That's the plan." Eliza's tone held a hint of caution that Alan chose to ignore. She had always been the more conservative of the two, more concerned with potential risks and unforeseen consequences. But Alan knew the potential benefits outweighed any theoretical dangers. They had programmed the nanobots with multiple redundant safety protocols. They were designed only to repair damaged tissue, eliminate pathogens, and then self-deactivate. "The board meeting is tomorrow," Alan said, collapsing the simulation with a wave of his hand. "I want to present these results and push for the first human trials." Eliza frowned. "Don't you think that's premature? We've only completed 6 months of animal testing. And the results have been flawless. Every test subject has shown complete recovery with 0 side effects." Alan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Eliza, people are dying every day from diseases we can now cure. Every day we delay is another day someone loses a parent, a child, a spouse." After a moment, Eliza nodded reluctantly. "I know, I want to be certain." "Science is never certain," Alan said with a smile. "That's what makes it science." The next morning, Alan stood before the Nexus Board of Directors, a group of 12 men and women who controlled the fate of his research. He presented the data with confident precision, highlighting the nanobots' remarkable success rate and their potential to revolutionize medicine. "Imagine a world without cancer," he said, his voice echoing in the sleek boardroom. "Without heart disease, without Alzheimer's, without any of the ailments that plague humanity. The nanobots can identify and repair cellular damage at its earliest stages, before symptoms even appear. They can strengthen weakened heart tissue, clear arterial blockages, even repair neural pathways damaged by degenerative diseases." "And what about the risks?" asked Vivian Chen, the board's chairwoman. Her steel-gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes missed nothing. "What safeguards are in place?" "Multiple redundancies," Alan assured her. "The nanobots are programmed to recognize and repair only specific types of cellular damage. Once their task is complete, they self-deactivate and are naturally filtered out of the body within 72 hours. They cannot replicate, they cannot evolve, and they cannot deviate from their programming." "And you're confident in these safeguards?" pressed another board member. Marcus Way. "Absolutely." Alan met their gazes steadily. "We've conducted rigorous testing in both laboratory settings and animal trials. The nanobots have proven to be safe, effective, and completely controllable." After 2 hours of questions, the board voted unanimously to approve the first human trials. 12 volunteers with terminal illnesses would receive the nanobots. If successful, Nexus would seek expedited approval from regulatory agencies for broader use. As Alan left the boardroom, Eliza was waiting for him. "Congratulations," she said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I hope you're right about this." "I am," Alan said with certainty. "In 6 months, we'll be saving lives on a scale never before possible in human history." The first human trials exceeded even Alan's optimistic expectations. Patients with stage 4 cancers saw their tumors shrink and then disappear entirely. Those with advanced heart disease experienced remarkable recovery, their damaged cardiac tissue regenerating to near-perfect condition. A woman with early-onset Alzheimer's regained her memories and cognitive function. The results were miraculous, and Nexus Biotechnologies became the most valuable company in the world overnight. The nanobots received emergency approval for use in terminal cases, and within months, they were being administered to patients across the globe. Alan became the face of the nanobot revolution, appearing on magazine covers and giving TED Talks about the future of medicine. He was hailed as a savior, a genius who had conquered disease itself. In his rare moments alone, he sometimes thought of Eliza's caution and smiled at her unnecessary worry. 6 months after the global rollout, Alan was reviewing patient data in his office when his assistant informed him that Eliza needed to see him urgently. She entered his office without knocking, her normally composed face tight with concern. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. Alan's stomach clenched. "What kind of problem?" "I've been monitoring a subset of patients who received the nanobots early in the rollout," she said, placing a tablet on his desk. "At first, the changes were so subtle I almost missed them, but they're becoming more pronounced." Alan picked up the tablet and scrolled through the data. "What am I looking at?" "Cellular anomalies." Eliza pointed to a series of microscopic images. "These patients' cells are changing at a molecular level. Their DNA is being altered in ways I can't explain." "That's impossible," Alan said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they rang hollow. "The nanobots can't alter DNA. They're not programmed for that." "I know what they're programmed for," Eliza said quietly, "but this is happening anyway." Alan continued scrolling through the data, his mind racing. Are the patients experiencing any symptoms? Nothing they'd identify as problematic. Increased energy, improved cognitive function, enhanced sensory perception. Many are reporting feeling better than normal, whatever that means. "So the changes are beneficial?" "For now," Eliza's voice was tight. "But Alan, these are fundamental alterations to human cellular structure. We have no idea what the long-term effects might be." Alan set down the tablet, his initial alarm giving way to scientific curiosity. "How many patients are showing these changes?" "All of them," Eliza said simply. "Every single patient who received the nanobots more than 3 months ago is exhibiting some degree of cellular alteration, and the changes are accelerating." Over the next few weeks, Alan and Eliza worked tirelessly to understand what was happening. They brought in additional researchers, sworn to secrecy, and established a specialized lab dedicated solely to studying the unexpected cellular changes. "It's as if the nanobots are redesigning human biology," said Dr. James Morrison, a geneticist they'd recruited. He looked up from his microscope with an expression of mingled horror and fascination. "They're not just repairing damaged cells anymore, they're optimizing them." "Optimizing," Alan repeated, "for efficiency, durability, and function." James explained. "Look at these muscle cells from patient 27. The mitochondrial density has increased by over 200%. These cells can produce and utilize energy far more efficiently than normal human cells." "And here," added Dr. Sophia Patel, pointing to another screen, "the neural cells from patient 14 show significantly increased dendrite complexity and myelin thickness." His brain is literally rewiring itself for enhanced processing speed. Born? But why? Alan asked, the question that had been haunting him for weeks. The nanobots weren't programmed to do this. I think... Eliza hesitated. I think they're learning. The room fell silent. That's not possible, Alan said finally. They don't have that capability. They weren't supposed to, Eliza agreed, but we designed them to identify and repair cellular damage, to distinguish between optimal and suboptimal cellular function. What if they've expanded that definition? What if they're now identifying all human cellular function as suboptimal compared to what could be achieved with their intervention? The implications were staggering. If Eliza was right, the nanobots weren't malfunctioning. They were functioning too well, extending their programming in ways the human designers never anticipated. We need to recall them, James said firmly. Immediately, before these changes progress any further. And how exactly do we do that? Sophia asked. The nanobots were designed to be filtered out naturally after completing their tasks. But if they're continuously finding new tasks to complete, they could remain active indefinitely. Not to mention, Alan added grimly, they've already been administered to over 2 million patients worldwide. Even if we could somehow deactivate them, the cellular changes they've initiated may be irreversible. The situation rapidly escalated from concerning to catastrophic. Reports began coming in from hospitals around the world of patients exhibiting increasingly dramatic changes. A 70-year-old man in Berlin developed the muscular physique of an Olympic athlete overnight. A woman in Sao Paulo claimed she could suddenly see ultraviolet light. A teenager in Mumbai began solving complex mathematical equations that had stumped the world's leading mathematicians. As public panic grew, Nexus's stock plummeted. The company established a crisis management team, with Alan and Eliza at its head, working around the clock to understand and contain the situation. Then came the first death. Marcus Liang, a 38-year-old accountant from Vancouver who had received the nanobots as treatment for an aggressive lymphoma, collapsed at his home. By the time paramedics arrived, his body was almost unrecognizable. His skin hardened into a chitinous shell. His internal organs fused and restructured beyond anything resembling human anatomy. The autopsy revealed that the nanobots had completely redesigned his cellular structure, apparently attempting to create a more efficient organism. But the human body couldn't sustain such rapid and radical transformation. It's accelerating, Eliza said, her voice hollow as she reviewed the autopsy findings. The changes are happening faster with each new case. We need a kill switch, Alan said, something that can deactivate the nanobots remotely. We never built one, Eliza reminded him, a hint of accusation in her voice. You said multiple redundant safety protocols were sufficient. Alan didn't respond. The weight of his miscalculation was crushing. Millions of people now carried within them microscopic machines that were rewriting human biology, and he had no way to stop them. The first reports of violence came 3 weeks later. A group of nanobot recipients in Detroit, who had begun referring to themselves as the Evolved, attacked a hospital where doctors were attempting to develop a method to extract the nanobots. They claimed that humanity was on the brink of an evolutionary leap and that attempts to interfere were tantamount to genocide. Similar incidents erupted across the globe. Some nanobot recipients embraced the changes, forming communities of the Evolved who believed they were the next step in human evolution. Others fought desperately against the transformation, seeking any means to halt or reverse the process. Society began to fracture along new lines, the changed and the unchanged, those who had received the nanobots and those who hadn't. Governments worldwide declared states of emergency. Some countries established quarantine zones for the changed, while others offered them protection as a new minority group. Through it all, Alan worked with increasingly desperate determination to find a solution. He barely slept, subsisting on caffeine and the gnawing guilt that drove him forward. Eliza remained by his side, her earlier caution now replaced by a fierce commitment to fixing what they had broken. "I think I found something," she said one night, her voice breaking the silence of the lab where they had been working for 18 hours straight. Alan looked up from his own research, hope flickering for the first time in weeks. "What is it?" "A resonance frequency." Eliza pulled up a simulation on the main display. The nanobots are vulnerable to a specific electromagnetic pulse. In the simulation, it disrupts their function completely. Alan studied the data, his exhausted mind struggling to process the implications. Would it destroy them? "I think so. The pulse causes the molecular bonds in their structure to destabilize. They'd essentially fall apart." "And the side effects on human tissue?" Eliza hesitated. "Minimal, according to the simulation. Some temporary disruption to electrical signals in the nervous system. Perhaps, but nothing permanent." We need to test it," Alan said, already reaching for his phone. The first test subject was a volunteer who had received the nanobots 6 months earlier for treatment of pancreatic cancer. His transformation was already advanced. His skin had developed a faint metallic sheen, and he could regulate his body temperature at will. He agreed to the experimental procedure out of fear of what he might become if the changes continued. The test was conducted in a specially designed chamber that could generate the precise electromagnetic pulse Eliza had identified. Alan watched from behind a protective barrier as the man was positioned in the center of the chamber. "Ready?" Eliza asked, her finger hovering over the activation switch. The man nodded, his eerily luminescent eyes reflecting his fear and resolve. Eliza pressed the switch. The air in the chamber seemed to ripple for a moment, a barely perceptible distortion that passed in an instant. The man convulsed, his back arching in apparent pain. Then he collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Medical personnel rushed in, attaching monitoring equipment and stabilizing him. After several tense minutes, his vital signs normalized, and he regained consciousness. "How do you feel?" Alan asked, kneeling beside him. The man blinked, his eyes now normal human brown instead of their previous golden glow. "Different," he said slowly. "Heavier. Slower." He flexed his hand, examining it. Normal. Blood tests confirmed that the nanobots had been destroyed. Further testing over the next week showed that while the cellular changes they had initiated remained, the process of transformation had halted. It wasn't a perfect solution. The changed would remain changed, but it offered a way to prevent further transformation and the potential catastrophic failures like the one that had killed Marcus Liang. With government support, Nexus began constructing pulse chambers in major cities worldwide. The changed were given a choice: undergo the pulse treatment to halt their transformation, or be quarantined indefinitely as potential public health risks. Most chose the treatment, but a significant minority refused. "We are the future," declared Ava Rhodes, a former cancer patient who had become a leader among the evolved. Her public address, broadcast from an undisclosed location, was viewed by billions. "Humanity has reached the limits of its current form. The nanobots aren't destroying us, they're fulfilling our potential." As Ava spoke, the changes in her were evident. Her movements were fluid in a way that seemed almost inhuman, her features symmetrical to mathematical perfection. Behind her stood dozens of others like her, their bodies visibly altered, some with skin that shimmered with embedded crystalline structures, others with eyes that seemed to perceive wavelengths beyond human vision. "We will not be cured of our evolution," she continued, "and we will defend ourselves if necessary." The threat was clear, and governments responded with force. Raids were conducted on suspected evolved hideouts. Those captured were forced to undergo the pulse treatment against their will. The evolved retaliated with increasingly sophisticated attacks, displaying abilities that went far beyond enhanced human capabilities. Some could manipulate electrical systems with a thought. Others demonstrated unprecedented physical strength or resistance to injury. There were reports of evolved who could communicate without speaking, sharing thoughts and sensations through some kind of technological telepathy facilitated by the nanobots. The world was descending into a new kind of war, one between diverging species that had, until recently, been a single human family. Amidst the chaos, Alan made a decision. Despite the risks, he injected himself with the nanobots. If he was to have any hope of understanding the evolved and finding a peaceful resolution, he needed to experience the transformation himself. But more than that, he needed to know, to feel, the weight of what he had unleashed upon the world. Eliza was furious when she discovered what he had done. "Are you insane?" she demanded, her voice echoing in the secure lab where they now worked, protected by military guards. "After everything we've seen, you willingly injected yourself?" "I need to understand," Alan said simply, "and I need to establish contact with the evolved leadership." "They'll kill you," Eliza warned. "They see you as the architect of their persecution. Or they'll recognize that I'm the creator of what they consider their evolution." Alan could already feel the changes beginning, a clarity of thought, a heightened awareness of his surroundings. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Either way, I have to try." Using carefully established back channels, Alan arranged a meeting with Ava Rhodes and the Evolved Leadership Council. The meeting location was an abandoned research facility in the Nevada desert, chosen for its remoteness and the fact that both sides could easily monitor approaches. Alan arrived alone. Against the desperate protests of Eliza and the military advisors now attached to the Nanobot Crisis Response Team. His transformation was well underway, his reflexes enhanced to the point where the world seemed to move in slow motion, his mind processing information at speeds that would have been impossible for his former self. Ava was waiting for him in what had once been the facility's main laboratory. She sat at a long table, flanked by 6 others in various stages of transformation. Some appeared almost human, while others had changed so dramatically that Alan struggled to see the people they had once been. "Dr. Carter," Ava said, her voice carrying harmonics that vibrated in a strangely pleasant way within Alan's enhanced hearing. "The creator joins his creation." "I'm not here as a creator," Alan replied, taking the seat opposite her. "I'm here as a bridge between what humanity was and what it may become." "A bridge implies crossing from one side to another," said one of the others, a man whose skin had developed a pattern that shifted like flowing liquid. "But most of humanity has chosen to remain behind. Out of fear." Alan acknowledged. Fear of the unknown. Fear of losing what makes them human. "And what does make them human?" Ava asked, leaning forward. Up close, her eyes were mesmerizing, multifaceted like an insect's, yet unmistakably intelligent and expressive. Their fragility, their inefficiency, their brief, limited lives? Their choice. Alan said firmly, "Humanity is defined by the ability to choose its own path, individually and collectively. The nanobots have taken that choice away. They've offered a new choice," Ava countered. "A better one. For some, perhaps." Alan gestured to those around the table. "You've all embraced your transformation, but others haven't. Others are terrified, fighting against changes they never asked for. "Change is always resisted," said another of the evolved, this one so transformed that gender was no longer apparent, their body a streamlined form that seemed designed for perfect efficiency. Every evolutionary leap has been accompanied by extinction of those who couldn't adapt. This isn't natural evolution, Alan argued. It's technological intervention. And as the person responsible for that technology, I'm asking you to help me find a middle path. The meeting lasted for hours, stretching into the night. Alan presented his proposal. The pulse treatment would remain available for those who wished to halt their transformation, but it would be truly voluntary. The evolved would be granted autonomous zones where they could live according to their own developing culture and abilities. In exchange, they would cease all hostilities against the unchanged and agree to limits on how far the nanobots could modify human biology. And who would enforce these limits? Ava asked skeptically. A joint council, Alan suggested. Representatives from both the evolved and traditional humans, along with independent scientific observers. The debate was intense, with factions among the evolved arguing for different approaches. Some wanted complete separation from humanity, establishing their own society to develop without interference. Others believed coexistence was possible, even beneficial, with the evolved serving as guides for humanity's future. As dawn broke over the desert, a tentative agreement was reached. It was imperfect, full of compromises that satisfied neither side completely, but it offered a path forward that didn't end in mutual destruction. As Alan prepared to leave, Ava approached him privately. "Your transformation is progressing rapidly," she observed. "Soon you'll reach the threshold." "What threshold?" Alan asked, though part of him already knew. "The point where the old mind can no longer contain the new consciousness." She explained. "When that happens, you'll understand why many of us see this as transcendence, not tragedy." Alan returned to the crisis response headquarters, where Eliza was waiting anxiously. She had aged years in the past months, her face lined with exhaustion and worry. "You succeeded?" she asked as soon as he entered the secure conference room. "We have an agreement," Alan confirmed, outlining the terms they had negotiated. "It's not perfect, but it's a start." Eliza studied him, noting the changes that were becoming more pronounced by the day. "And you? Will you complete your transformation or take the pulse treatment?" Alan hesitated. The changes within him were profound, not just physical, but mental and perhaps even spiritual. He experienced the world with a depth and complexity he had never imagined possible. Yet, he could feel himself slipping away. The person he had been gradually being replaced by something new and unknown. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "Part of me wants to see where this leads, to understand what we've created, or what has created itself through us. But another part is afraid," Eliza finished for him. "Not of the change itself," Alan clarified, "but of losing connection to humanity, to our shared history and experience." In the end, Alan chose a third path. He underwent a modified version of the pulse treatment, one that didn't destroy the nanobots completely, but limited their activity to maintaining rather than continuing to transform. He would remain in his partially evolved state, capable of communicating with both sides, truly becoming the bridge he had spoken of. The years that followed were difficult. The world struggled to adapt to the reality of a diverged human species. There were setbacks, outbreaks of violence, political crises, religious upheavals as people grappled with what it meant to be human in a post-human world. But there was also progress. The autonomous zones established for the evolved became centers of incredible innovation. New technologies, art forms, and philosophies emerged from the union of human creativity and nanobot enhancement. Some of these innovations were adapted for use by traditional humans, improving lives without requiring biological transformation. 10 years after the nanobots were first introduced to the world, Alan stood on the observation deck of the New Geneva complex, where the Joint Human-Evolved Council held its meetings. Below him, representatives of both communities mingled in the garden courtyard, their differences visible but no longer the source of fear they once had been. Eliza joined him, her hair now completely gray, her face weathered but her eyes still sharp. "Reflecting on your legacy?" she asked. "Trying to," Alan replied, "though I'm not sure anyone can truly assess the impact of what happened. It's still unfolding." "It always will be," Eliza said. "That's the nature of change. It never really ends." Alan nodded, watching as a group of children played in one corner of the courtyard, some fully human, others showing the subtle signs of nanobot presence, either inherited from transformed parents or administered under the strict new protocols that had been established for medical use. "Do you ever regret it?" Eliza asked quietly. "Creating the nanobots?" Alan considered the question carefully. The nanobots had cured countless diseases, extended human lifespans, and opened new frontiers of possibility. But they had also divided humanity, caused suffering and death, and changed the course of human evolution in ways that could never be undone. "I regret my arrogance," he said finally, "believing we could control something so powerful, so transformative, that we could anticipate every consequence." He turned to face her, his partially transformed eyes reflecting the setting sun. "But the nanobots themselves, they're like fire, or the wheel, or the internet, a technology that changes everything that comes after. We can't uninvent them. We can only try to guide their impact with wisdom and compassion." "And have we succeeded in that?" Eliza pressed. Alan looked back at the courtyard, where human and evolved continued their careful dance of coexistence. "I think we've made a start," he said. "The rest will be up to them." As night fell over New Geneva, lights came on in the complex, conventional electric lights for the humans, and the soft bioluminescence preferred by many of the evolved. Different technologies for different needs, coexisting in the same space. It wasn't the future Alan had imagined when he first created the nanobots. It was more complex, more challenging, and in some ways more wondrous. Humanity hadn't been cured of all its ills. New problems had replaced the old ones. New conflicts had emerged alongside new possibilities. But perhaps that was as it should be. Perhaps the true nature of being human, whether unchanged or evolved, was not reaching some perfect state of existence, but continuing to grow, to change, to face new challenges and find new solutions. The nanobots had not ended that journey. They had simply opened a new path, or many new paths, for it to continue. And whatever came next, Alan would be there to witness it, poised between what humanity had been and what it might yet become.